What'd she say?
I'm doing a live. Give it about a minute. Okay, hello everyone. This is this month's writing club meeting. Today's topic is plot, as you can see right here on my lovely thing. And now we're going to make it go away. So, hi, I'm Cassie with the Clinton Public Library. Just adjust this, try to adjust it a little bit better. Okay. It's hooked onto my computer and it doesn't have like a bendy bit. So we are going to be talking about plot today and the different kinds of plot that you can find in different stories. Now, I have a whiteboard, so I'll hold it up in a second once I get my drawing done. Which isn't going to be fun. I'm not a very good artist. Most of us, when we're taught in school, you see plot as something like this. You're starting out, your inciting incident, the rise of action, the climax, and then the fall. That is the classic story structure. Hello everybody who just joined us. We're talking about plot structures for our writing club today. So that was the basic basically introducing the characters and the setting. Then something happens that's your inciting incident, and then suddenly there's a bunch of actions that come up to a point that's your climax, and then you have your falling action. What happens after the climax, everything wraps up. That's the basics of a story. Now, that's just the most basic. You can see it with like Little Red Riding Hood. We are introduced to Little Red Riding Hood going into the forest. We're introduced to her mother and kind of to her grandmother, and then she comes and meets the big bad wolf. That is our inciting incident. So then Big Bad Wolf starts keeping her from getting to her grandmother's house so he can go and chomp the grandmother. And then the climax would be the, oh, what big eyes you have, what big teeth you have. That would be the climax point of that story. And then the falling action is after the woodcutter has rescued Riding Hood. Like the whole climax would be that whole he chomps her and the woodsman comes in and saves her. It's considered one of the more simple plots. Is this the right one? Yeah, there we go. Next one we're going to cover is the Fijian curve, which you can see up there. Sorry, my voice is cracking. So that one is.
Yeah, Charlotte's no good for anybody. Justice is gonna learn justice.
That drawing is better than my drawing. How do they put it? Rising action. Okay. I've heard different terms used, but I like rising action the best. So an event happens, and there's a rising action to the next event, to the next event, to the next event, to the next event, until you finally come to the climax, and then you have the fall. So ones like that. Oh, there's an example on this web page. It's pretty good. Here's all the information about how it was invented, but here we go. Here's my favorite, The Wizard of Oz. So for this example, you have a tornado sweeps Dorothy away over the rainbow. I would argue that is not the first rising action. In fact, that is probably the second or the third rising action. The first rising action is the whole thing with Toto. That would be the first action. Then the tornado comes in and sweeps Dorothy away. No, and then Dorothy runs away. That would be the next one, and she meets the circus guy, the wizard. Then she's swept away by the tornado. But she ends up landing. However, she lands on the Wicked Witch of the East, and that gets her threatened by the Wicked Witch of the West, which is the next rising action crisis. Being threatened by the Wicked Witch of the West. And then she meets Glinda, that's the fall. That's the falling point, but now she's gotten told she needs to go to see the wizard. So the next point is meeting the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, all having their own little loops in there. And then we come to the Poppy Field, which is the next loop. That's the next crisis. Then the next crisis is going to be the wizard needs the broom of the Wicked Witch. Then the next one is the flying monkeys capturing Dorothy and taking her to the witch. The highest climax point is where Dorothy melts the witch. That is the climax. Then the falling action is going to be Dorothy and all the friends getting what they were looking for. And then Dorothy waking up at home. So that website, in fact, is Kindlepreneur. Specifically, the article about the Fijian Crypt. There's a bunch more examples like Star Wars: A New Hope, Lion King. It does lend itself best to very action-focused things like mysteries, thrillers, horror in a way. Sometimes fantasy if you're going for a really big push into the fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, like fight, 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 emergency, fight, emergency. This is the one I just showed you at the first, beginning, the middle, and the conclusion, the exposition. You're introducing everybody. The rising action, that's all the events that lead up to the climax. The falling action, and then the resolution. Freytag's Pyramid's the next one. It's kind of basically the sorry, excuse me for constantly looking in confusion, because that's Freytag's Pyramid. So Freytag's Pyramid is, do it in a separate color. Oh, that one's almost right. So I'm not going to lose you. I might just stick with black then. Let's see if the blue is better. Alright, I got 2 dried out markers. Oops. Knowing Monarch. Alright, so we're going to start off with the intro. This is where you introduce the status quo. And then your inciting incident occurs, and then you have the rising action. Alright, not my best work, but I'm working upside down and backwards. Deal with it. That's going to be pursuit of the goal. This is going to be what they have to, this is the climax point. This is when they have to do their toughest fight for their goal. This is the point of no return from which they can no longer go back to the status quo. And then there's the return or the fall, and then the catastrophe. This is mainly used for tragedies. Think Oedipus Rex. We're introduced to Oedipus. Oedipus is trying to find out how to stop this curse on his kingdom. This is the point in which we find out that Oedipus has actually wed his mother and had children by her. And then that starts our descent that leads with his mother slash wife's death and his own. That's the catastrophe. Alright, we're going to go on to the next one. That is the hero's journey. This one has entire books written about it, so I'm just going to gloss over it real quick. I do highly suggest looking up more on it. It is very complex and yet at the same time very simple. It is also called the monomyth by some. All right. So we got a circle. So your story is going to go in that circle. The ordinary world where you're introduced to everybody. That is where everything starts. Here's everyday life is established. This is Luke Skywalker on the moisture farm. Then they find the droids. This is the call to adventure, also known as the inciting incident. The refusal of the call. This is a moment where the hero is reluctant to take on the challenge. Meeting the mentor. Luke takes the droids to Obi-Wan Kenobi. This point right here is kind of where that whole argument with his uncle happens. Crossing the first threshold. That is when he finds his aunt and uncle dead. I'm sorry. So now he must thresh out into the new world. That's your next one. That's when they go to the cantina. I am completely getting these points wrong on here. Approach the innermost cave. Luke reaches the Death Star. Oh, I forgot tests, allies, and enemies. This is where they pick up new friends. This is where we start. This is where we get Han and Chewie and all that fun part. Now we go on to the approach the inmost cave. Hero gets close to their goal. Luke gets on the Death Star. The ordeal. The hero meets and overcomes their greatest challenge yet. This is the trench run. The reward. Death Star goes boom. It's also called seizing the sword. Hero tames something important they were after, and the victory is in sight. This is the road back, where the hero faces their final challenge, a climactic test that hinges on everything that they've learned over their journey. Okay, so that one is the Death Star. Apologies, sometimes my brain goes faster than anything I can think of. Okay, this part right in here, this is the whole rescuing Leia and getting off of the Death Star, getting all the plans back to the rebels. This is blowing the Death Star to Kingdom Come. This is the resurrection. Usually this is the point in which if you're following the old monomyths, this is the point in which the hero dies and then is brought back to life. And then the return with the elixir. This is having triumphed, our protagonist returns to their old life. For example, we'll use Wizard of Oz again. Dorothy goes back to Kansas. We can also use Iron Man. Iron Man holds the press conference where he does the I am Iron Man thing. That's basically the hero's journey. Like I said, you can find better explanations of it. 3-act structure. It's a squiggly. It's a squiggly. This is where you get the phrase denouement from. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have your exposition where you're meeting everybody, your first inciting incident, plot point 1, rising action, midpoint, plot point 2, pre-climax, climax, denouement, and that leads to your ending. basically in the part of a 3-act play. Romeo and Juliet meet and fall in love, and then they get married. And then they get married. That's Act 1. Act 2 is the whole thing with the um, death of Benvolio. It's been a while since I've read Romeo and Juliet, but basically Romeo ends up getting exiled, and Juliet is being forced to marry Paris? Whoever she's being forced to marry. That brings us to plot point 2, where Romeo is going to do whatever he can to get her back, but she's already taken her own measures and has ended up faking her own death, and Romeo doesn't know that she's faked her own death, and he kills himself. She kills herself. That is the climax. The denouement is the whole speech afterwards, with the Capulets and the Montagues finding out what has happened from Friar Tuck, or the friar, and the whole exposition, or the whole talky bit from the Prince of Verona about now these two houses lay in destroyed. That's your denouement. That's the ending. That's the loose ends are tied up. And then the new status quo is established. I'm not familiar with this one. The next one on this list, that's Dan Harmon's story cycle. So in a comfort that they want something, so they enter an unfamiliar situation, they adapt to it, they get what they wanted, but they pay a heavy price, and then they return to their familiar situation having changed. So this could be Legend of Korra. So you got the establishment of Korra as this waterbend, basically have mastered all the elements but air. Then the next bit is she wants to master air. She needs to master air. So she goes to the city. And she then all the stuff that happens as she's adapting to life in the city. They get what they wanted, they learn how to airbend. But what's all the fighting that's gone on, the whole thing with the bloodbenders and the war and all of that. And then they have returned to their familiar situation. Now they are master of all of the elements, but they have changed and they've gotten a girlfriend out of it. Again, I do recommend going to Readsy. They do have this whole article. I've already covered the Fijian curve. It has a really good breakdown of the novel Everything I Never Told You. Fijian curve, I'm probably horribly mispronouncing that, by the way, is really good for anything that's being told out of chronological order, such as Everything I Never Told You by Celeste. By I don't even want to mangle her name because I know I will. You can see the picture right there. Everything I Never Told You. New York Times bestseller. It does have spoilers in the explanation, but it is a pretty good in-depth explanation. Save the Cat, you can actually find beat sheets of that around the internet. If you go to, I've got to go back to my live thing on here so that you guys can see this. If you go to our classroom, right here, that Google Classroom right there, anyone can join it. Then I've got links to various beat sheets, story ladders, etc. on Google Drive that you can download for yourself. And then those ones explain it in depth. The Save the Cat beat sheet is well known. It did start in like screenwriting, but it has been adopted by a lot of writers. The 7-point plot structure, you have the hook, Snap the hook, draw the readers in by explaining the protagonist's current situation. Their state of being at the beginning of the novel should be direct contrast as to what it will be at the end. This is your war stories. They're bright and innocent when they leave, but when they come back, they're horrified by what they've had to do. Plot point 1, whether it's a person or an idea, an exciting incident, or something else, this should be called the point to adventure in some sorts. That's basically what starts this whole adventure off. Then you have the pinch point. Things can't all be sunshine and roses. Something goes wrong. That gets you to your midpoint, the turning point, where the main character changes from a passive force in the story to an active force. Whatever the main conflict is, the protagonist starts meeting it head on. So this is like plot point 1 could be going to basic, and now you're being sent out into the, I don't know, Pacific Theater. And you're on, let's say you're on the USS Indianapolis. Midpoint would be the turning point in which that's when you're getting attacked. You've dropped off your very super secret cargo, which if you didn't know, the USS Indianapolis actually carried the parts that were needed for the 2 atom bombs that were dropped on Japan. I don't know if it was both of them, but it was definitely one of them. And then when it went out again, it was sank by a Japanese submarine. So the midpoint here would be fighting against the Japanese, trying to survive. That's where pinch point 2 comes in. The ship is sinking, but now they have to deal with sharks in the water. And they end up surviving, and coming back home, but the character has basically now has PTSD. That is just a very rough one I came up with in my head for just a couple of minutes. So those are the 7 basic plot structures. There are more, and these can all be tweaked. You can always add in other, like for instance, the classic story structure. The rising action can take 2/3 of the book. It should take 2/3 of the book until you get up to the climax, the big final fight, the no man can kill me, I am not a man. Like that would be like the climax of her story. Or Frodo, or the ring falling into Mount Doom. That would be the climax of the story. And then you have the falling action. Everything goes boom. And the humans and the elves and everyone, yay, we won. And then you have the conclusion being allowed on the boat to the elf lands. So I'm going to stop here. If anyone has any questions, you can ask. I do highly recommend going to our writing club. That's so you can. I will be right back. Yes. No one's up here. Mm-mm. So yes, that's the basics of several different plot structures. I do highly encourage you guys to join our Google Classroom. The link is right there. I do believe it is on our Facebook page as well. So please, we just highly encourage you all to join that. We do have where you can submit your writing and we will go over it and give you suggestions. We're not going to be mean about it. Say, oh, I think a comment is supposed to go here. Can you make this wording a little bit tighter? It seems kind of weird to me, or it's interesting that you're writing in like, I don't know, present tense versus past tense. Here's some writing resources I found for writing in the present tense. That kind of stuff. So that is our very quick, very nice little live. We will be back next month. We always do these meetings on the second Tuesday. Well, when's our next one? First Tuesday. will be on the 3rd of next month, and we will be covering editing. So, tune in on the 3rd of December at 5 o'clock, and we will be having our discussion then. I do also, like I said, I do recommend joining us on our little writing club on our Google Classroom. Right there, I will keep it up for a minute or two so you guys can go and check it out, or you can go to our Facebook page, Clinton Public Library in Clinton, Indiana. It is on our Facebook page. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any comments? I have been talking straight for 25 minutes, and now I get to go and do this on YouTube. So check us out on our YouTube page if you want to go over everything all over again. Thank you guys, and have a nice evening.